might not like hearing this, but some of the things you're doing to fix your life are quietly making it worse. Not because your intentions are bad. It's because no one told you that the very tools you're using to heal might be the ones keeping you stuck. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And he meant that literally. We overcommit to growth, drown ourselves in positivity, cut ties, change habits, change diets, read all the books, and somehow still feel hollow. Still wake up wondering, why does nothing really feel different? This isn't about self-help being wrong. It's about what happens when fixing becomes the new form of hiding. There's a subtle point where growth turns into avoidance, and most of us don't even notice when we cross that line. If you've ever said, I just need to fix myself, you're already in it. That mindset sounds empowering at first, but more often than not, it's rooted in shame. And shame doesn't heal. It divides. It splits you into the version you think you should be and the one you actually are. And that gap never closes. It only widens the more you try to outrun it. That's what this is about. The hidden traps of self-improvement. The things that sound right, feel productive, even get applauded, but underneath, they're keeping you fragmented. Jung warned us about this, but most people never understood what he was really saying. So let's walk through 5 of the most common things people do to try and fix their lives that end up quietly doing more harm, not in theory, in real, emotional, day-to-day terms. And we'll start with the one that almost everyone falls into. Let's start with the first trap: constant self-work. At first glance, it looks admirable. You're journaling, meditating, tracking habits, reading, going to therapy, trying new routines. That sounds like responsibility, but what happens when that becomes your entire personality? When self-improvement turns into self-erasure? There's this quiet panic underneath it all. I have to fix myself or I won't be lovable. I have to improve or I'll be left behind. And that fear fuels a never-ending cycle of tweaking, optimizing, overanalyzing. Carl Jung warned about this when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What most people don't realize is that the obsession with improvement is often driven by something unconscious. Shame, fear, rejection, even old childhood wounds. The external effort looks noble, but the internal driver is unresolved pain. It's easy to think you're healing when what you're really doing is remodeling your mask. You swap out the old persona for a better one, more mindful, more successful, more emotionally intelligent, but it's still a mask. Here's the twist. Genuine inner growth doesn't look like a polished routine. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence without reaching for a fix. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it means doing absolutely nothing and letting what's underneath finally speak. But that kind of stillness makes people uncomfortable because it forces confrontation with who they really are, with what they've been avoiding by working on themselves so aggressively. And the wellness industry knows this. It quietly profits off your belief that you're always one habit, one supplement, one morning routine away from being whole. In 2023 alone, the global personal development market was valued at over $40 billion. That's a lot of money made from people feeling like they aren't enough yet. So ask yourself, are you healing or are you decorating the cage? Are you building a self or are you just running from the parts of you that feel unworthy? The scariest part of all this, you can spend years in that loop and call it growth. You can look like someone who has their life together while never having met your real self. And if that struck something in you, good. Because the next thing we need to talk about is what happens when you try to build a good life while refusing to feel anything bad. That one's even trickier. Now let's talk about the second point, using positivity as a disguise. It's everywhere. The quotes, the mantras, the mindset coaches telling you to focus on the good and stay high vibe. Social media made it trendy to act like feeling down is a flaw in your mindset instead of a normal part of being alive. But here's the truth: constantly pushing away sadness, anger, grief, or shame doesn't make you healed. It just makes those emotions go underground. And when something's buried, it doesn't disappear, it festers. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or disown. He believed the more you try to exile your darkness, the more control it gains over you from behind the scenes. The more you pretend to be okay, the more you disconnect from what's actually asking for your attention. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, "I shouldn't feel this way," or "I need to move on," or "other people have it worse"? It sounds mature, but all you're really doing is gaslighting yourself into silence. Research from the University of Texas found that suppressing emotions doesn't make them go away. It actually makes them stronger over time. They leak out in other ways: stress, tension, insomnia, explosive arguments over small things. The body keeps the score, as they say, and it doesn't forget what you refuse to feel. Even in therapy, people will come in with the goal of getting rid of anxiety or sadness. But those feelings often carry messages. They're not random. They're reactions to something real. When you ignore them, you miss the signal. And when positivity becomes a performance, you lose your grip on reality. Everything starts to feel fake. You start smiling when you're exhausted, saying "I'm fine" when you're not, posting selfies with long captions about growth while quietly feeling emptier than ever. So here's the question: what emotions have you labeled as wrong or bad? Which parts of you are you trying to silence under the mask of being okay? You can't heal what you refuse to touch. And if you've been numbing out or staying overly positive for too long, it's likely you've started to forget what your real voice even sounds like. And that's dangerous, because the more you lose touch with your real emotions, the easier it becomes to fill that void with distraction. You stay busy, you stay booked, you stay efficient. Now we move into something that hits even harder because it's rewarded everywhere: being productive. This is the third trap: trying to fix your life by becoming more efficient, more organized, more on top of things. It feels like control. You make to-do lists. You time block your calendar. You squeeze meaning into every second of your day. And for a while, it works. You feel accomplished, respected, maybe even admired. But quietly, you start to disappear inside all the doing. Carl Jung warned of this when he observed how modern life pulls us outward towards systems, schedules, roles, while the soul is still waiting inward. He believed that a life disconnected from inner purpose leads to spiritual emptiness, no matter how full your days are. And that's what's happening. A 2022 Gallup report found that 60% of people feel emotionally detached from their work, even if they're good at it. Many aren't even burned out in the traditional sense. They're just numb, going through the motions, functioning without feeling. We've confused productivity with purpose, being busy with being fulfilled. But here's a question that doesn't show up on a planner. Who told you that being useful is the same thing as being alive? Sometimes people stay busy just to avoid sitting still with themselves. The silence scares them, not because it's empty, but because it's full of things they haven't faced yet. Regrets, longings, doubts, unlived dreams. You can't hear those when you're constantly checking something off. And yet, our culture keeps pushing the same script. Wake up earlier, hustle harder, optimize everything. We've turned rest into laziness and stillness into guilt. But Jung believed that the soul doesn't speak through speed. It speaks through symbol, image, emotion, things that don't fit neatly into task lists. So again, ask yourself honestly, is your calendar full, but your heart still restless? Are you productive, but not present? Do you feel like you're building something or just surviving another Monday? The tragedy here is that some people spend years polishing their systems, mastering their workflows, climbing invisible ladders, only to wake up one day and realize they never once asked where they were actually going. And once you've built your whole identity around being productive, tearing it down feels terrifying. So instead of listening to the discomfort, you double down. You cut distractions, you cut noise, you even start cutting people. Which takes us to the next point, and this one gets complicated: cutting people off. It's become a kind of slogan now: protect your peace, no more toxic energy, I'm done explaining myself. And sure, boundaries matter. Some people genuinely are harmful. Walking away can be necessary. But here's the problem: not every difficult relationship is toxic. Not every uncomfortable conversation is a threat to your well-being. Sometimes discomfort is growth trying to happen. Carl Jung believed that what we reject in others is often a mirror of what we haven't accepted in ourselves. He said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But when you label everyone who triggers you as toxic, you lose that mirror, you lose the lesson. Think about it. That friend who calls you out, maybe they're not cruel, maybe they're just honest in a way you're not used to. That partner who challenges your thinking, maybe they're not controlling, maybe they're reflecting back your fear of vulnerability. Now ask yourself this: are you setting boundaries, or are you just avoiding reflection? We live in a time where healing often gets filtered through aesthetics, muted colors, crystals, affirmations. But real healing can be uncomfortable. It requires friction. It needs pressure. Sometimes the people who annoy us the most are revealing the exact sore spot we need to address. Of course, this doesn't mean tolerate abuse. That's not what we're talking about. The danger is when the word toxic becomes a catch-all for anything that makes us feel insecure, unsure, or challenged. That kind of cut-off culture doesn't lead to strength, it leads to isolation. And here's the irony: in trying to protect your peace, you can end up avoiding the very relationships that would have helped you grow if you stayed open long enough to learn something from the conflict. So again, slow down and really ask, am I protecting myself, or am I protecting my ego? Am I walking away from someone, or from my own uncomfortable truth? The more you cut off every rough edge, the more you shape a world that feels safe, but also sterile. And healing doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in relationships, in tension, in accountability. And the deeper danger is this: if you're constantly curating your circle to only include people who agree with you, you stop growing altogether. You mistake comfort for evolution. But there's one more trap that's even harder to detect, because it hides behind good intentions. It hides behind your idea of who you're supposed to be. This final trap is the hardest to recognize because it wears the face of growth, trying to become who you think you're supposed to be. From childhood, you've been absorbing scripts, some loud, some silent. Be kind, be successful, be agreeable, be independent, be put together. And over time, you build a version of yourself that gets rewarded. That gets claps. That doesn't stir the water too much. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. It's not fake in the way people think. It's necessary. But the danger comes when the mask starts replacing the real thing. When you confuse your act with your identity, you become the high achiever, the chill friend, the therapist in the group, the funny one, the always in control one. But you're also exhausted. You wonder why no one really knows you, or worse, why you don't know yourself. The world praises personas. They're efficient, predictable, marketable. But Jung warned that when the gap between who you really are and who you pretend to be gets too wide, something snaps. You begin to feel hollow, directionless, like you're living your life from the outside in. Look around. This isn't rare. According to a 2023 survey by the American Psychological Association, nearly half of young adults say they often feel like imposters in their own lives, like they're performing instead of living. And here's the part most people won't say out loud. Trying to be the best version of yourself can become a trap because it's usually based on external standards. And no matter how close you get, it never feels like enough. The finish line moves, the bar shifts. You're always behind. So ask yourself, who would you be if no one was watching, if there was no one left to impress? What version of you have you locked away because it didn't fit the mold? The pressure to become who you should be will quietly kill who you are. And if you spend too long trying to live up to an image, one day you'll look in the mirror and realize you don't recognize the person staring back. And that moment, that's usually when people come undone, or, if they're lucky, start waking up. Because there's a different path, but it's slower, it doesn't look polished, and it doesn't sell as easily. That's the path Jung pointed to, the path of integration, of wholeness. So here we are. You've spent years trying to fix yourself, thinking if you just read the right book, nailed the right routine, or became the right version of you, the pieces would finally click. But maybe the reason it still feels off is because you were never broken to begin with, just fragmented, just pulled too far from your center. Carl Jung wasn't telling people to chase perfection. He was asking them to get honest, to meet their full self, not just the parts that get praise. Real growth doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like unraveling, like remembering, like slowing down long enough to ask, who have I abandoned just to feel acceptable? And maybe that person is you. So if something cracked open while you were listening, don't push it away. Don't rush to cover it up with another fix. Sit with it. Let it breathe. That's where integration begins. That's where the masks start to slip and something real comes through. You don't need to perform wholeness. You just need to come home to it. And if this resonated, don't just move on to the next video. Pause. Reflect. Share this with someone who's been stuck in that same cycle. Someone who keeps trying to be enough when they already are. Drop a comment if this stirred anything in you. I read them. And if you're ready for more content that challenges surface-level advice and goes deeper, subscribe. We're not here to escape ourselves. We're here to meet ourselves fully.